After a long day at school on October 26, 2018, I couldn't wait to get home. This wasn't just any regular Friday, it was the release day of Red Dead Redemption 2, a game I had been eagerly anticipating after not one but 2 delays. The moment I got home, I tore off the packaging, opened the case, and was greeted by this. After waiting about an hour for the game to install, I dove straight in and went on a weekend bender, racing through the entire story in just 3 days. Some of you might consider that an achievement, but for me it's one of my biggest video game regrets. Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't just a great game, it's a genuine passion project brought to life by thousands of Rockstar employees who endured years of grueling crunch culture. An ungodly number of combined human hours went into creating one of the most realistic games ever made. From dynamic horse balls, to some of the best snow and mud physics ever, animal and human corpses that go through different stages of decay, meticulously drawn out animations, and truly so much more. Red Dead Redemption 2 isn't just visually realistic either. The entire experience is packed with countless side activities and mechanics, from hunting and fishing, to gambling, bounty hunting, camping, crafting, cooking, and more. Instead of beating the game in just 3 days, I wish I'd spent 3 weeks savoring everything it has to offer. Regardless, Red Dead Redemption 2 instantly became one of my favorite video games of all time, thanks to its groundbreaking narrative and deeply immersive open world. While many people share the same opinion as I do, the game still created a large group of critics who pointed out its few but fair flaws. Arguably the most hotly debated aspect of Red Dead Redemption 2 was its emphasis on realism. About a month after the game's release, Outside Xbox posted a video titled 7 times realism was way too realistic. Of course they brought up Red Dead 2, and while doing so they focused on the hunting and how it was way too complicated, especially compared to the arcadey design of the previous game. I do understand where they're coming from, as the hunting system has several different mechanics like tracking your prey, weapon choice that actually matters, wind and scent mechanics, kill quality that can affect the value of your pelts, and more. But just because you don't enjoy the monotony of hunting doesn't make its inclusion a bad aspect of the game. It's one thing if the game forced hunting down your throat like how Rocksteady did with the Batmobile, but in Red Dead 2, hunting is almost entirely optional outside of a mission or two, and yet it still has the depth of a full-fledged hunting simulator. In that very same Outside Xbox video, another game was saved until the very end. When I was first watching back at the end of 2018, this was my first introduction to Kingdom Come Deliverance, a game that began on Kickstarter and promised to be an ultra-realistic and immersive medieval simulator. If you couldn't tell by now, I have a huge soft spot for realism in video games, with Red Dead Redemption 2 kicking off my thirst for the next realistic experience. However, for a very long time, super realistic games like Arma, DayZ, Squad, and Hell Let Loose were only saved for the PC community. But Kingdom Come Deliverance aimed to bring the niche and acquired taste of clunky, realistic games to consoles. Nevertheless, I was too scared to give the game a chance during the first few years after its release. While KCD received positive reviews and opinions from both critics and fans, there were still plenty of people who lampooned the game for being clunky, unpolished, and overly challenging. I picked up the game a few years later on PC in 2021, and after a few play sessions and about 8 to 10 hours of gameplay, I ended up abandoning the game. There was a lot that I liked about it, and I wanted to get farther into the game to experience all that it had to offer, but for one reason or another I got distracted by other titles. At the time I'm writing this script, the highly anticipated sequel, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, is nearing its release, and by the time you're all watching, the game will have already been out for at least a few days. Now, I don't want to jinx anything, but I think it's safe to say that KCD 2 is positioned to be one of the greatest sequels of all time. Several YouTubers were able to put in hundreds of hours before the game even released, and everyone keeps saying the same thing. All of KCD's systems have been polished and refined, the world has been expanded greatly, and most importantly, the game seems to be running like an absolute dream. But obviously we wouldn't be here now if it weren't for Warhorse's first attempt at creating a medieval life simulator. The first Kingdom Come Deliverance is one of the most unique video games ever made, and unfortunately, while many people are aware of the game, few have actually pushed through the game's less desirable moments in order to experience one of the greatest RPG titles of all time. And I don't blame those who weren't able to invest the time it takes to actually enjoy KCD, as the game does not hold your hand in the slightest. Sure, the game gives you a map, compass, and tells you the exact location you need to go to next, but the game has so many other challenging aspects. KCD is literally designed to be unfair from the very beginning, as you play as Henry, a peasant who is utterly fucking useless. Just like peasants in real life, Henry is weak, untrained, and a complete buffoon who can't even read. It can easily take up to 100 hours to experience all the story and content that Kingdom Come has to offer, but best believe that the first 10 to 20 hours are filled with moments that will challenge your patience. By far the biggest thing that will prevent casual players from sticking with the game is the complicated, unfair, and very janky combat system. It's easily the most common complaint that you'll see people levy at the game, and I get it. Combat for the first few hours in Kingdom Come can be incredibly off-putting. However, the game is designed to initially be that way. As I said previously, you play as a peasant who has no idea how to do anything, let alone defend himself in combat. Even experienced KCD players will still struggle in the early hours of the game, as Henry is just not a capable fighter. All of Henry's skills start at 0, and his attack animations are slow and paired with intentional input lag. After a few hours, you'll start to get competent with the combat system, but Henry's skills will still be too low even if you try your best to grind during the early hours of the game. Thankfully, there aren't too many combat encounters that you're forced to experience, as you can often run away, but eventually after 10 to 12 hours into the game, there's a boss encounter that is fully unavoidable. I don't know what the KCD community has to say about this one, but the Runt boss fight really pushed my buttons. I probably died about 30 times before stepping away from the game, and thankfully when I returned, I only died about 5 to 10 times before finally beating him. I wouldn't have been too annoyed if it was just an honest challenge with the boss that was a few levels higher than me, but with this fight and other normal combat encounters in the game, there are several times where you'll be magnetized and forced into a combat animation. These moments are incredibly immersion breaking and frustrating, as you can literally be sprinting away when you will suddenly be yanked into an animation that can often result in your death. If I'm being fair, this is realistic, as someone like Henry would get thrown around and dominated by a barbarian in real life. However, I do draw the line at a certain point. I love realism and the influence it can have on the level of immersion in video games, but it should never be realistic to the point where it causes frustration. Is that a subjective statement? Absolutely. In the case of Red Dead Redemption 2, I never had a problem with the long and repetitive animations for interacting with objects. Meanwhile, there were plenty of people who didn't have the patience to sit through multiple animations in a row of Arthur bending over to pick up and loot a dead body. But for me, I love video games that use realistic mechanics that force you to be patient and immerse yourself in the world. Even though Dark Souls and other challenging games have never been my cup of tea, I'm still not opposed to struggling in a video game, and I think that's another reason why I love Kingdom Come. Were there moments in the game that frustrated me? Absolutely, but I forced myself to stick with the game, and I was rewarded with moments of pure adrenaline once I overcame certain challenging sections. Warhorse attempted to reinvent first-person melee combat with KCD, and while there were plenty of rough and jagged edges, I fully love and admired the system that they were able to create. A problem in other first-person RPGs like the Elder Scrolls is that the combat can feel weightless and floaty, which can leave a lot to be desired. Meanwhile, everything in Kingdom Come Deliverance is incredibly weighty, which does a great job at making the combat feel much more grounded and realized. Not only that, but I especially appreciate the level of control and freedom that the combat offers. When you attack in the majority of other games, you don't really get a say as to what animation will play out, but in Kingdom Come you are given full control during combat. You get to decide the angle you swing your sword at thanks to the combat wheel in the middle of the screen, which allows you to strike from either side or swing over the top while also giving you the option to stab. I understand why the combat ruins so many people's perception of KCD, but it's genuinely a real shame, as Kingdom Come Deliverance is a slow burn that truly blossoms into one of the most satisfying video game experiences of all time. KCD is not intended to be a game for everyone, but I do think that more people would fall in love with the game if they gave it at least 20 hours. That is a lot to ask for, especially for adults who have multiple responsibilities to manage, but if you can fit in a few hours here and there, eventually the game really starts to open up. It takes about 8 hours for the game to give you a horse, but even then it can still feel like the game is restricting you. However, just like the combat, if you stick through for just a few more hours, the game really begins to open up and everything starts to click, especially once the game introduces one of the best characters, Father Godwin.
This is wonderful!
Yes, it does take several dozens of hours before Henry starts to feel like a competent character, but thankfully the progression system is one of the best aspects of KCD. Instead of leveling up and spending experience points on whatever skills you want to improve, in Kingdom Come Deliverance you only get good at something by actually doing it. And this goes for everything from combat to speech, stealth, and even drinking. Yes, Henry can actually improve his tolerance for alcohol, and KCD probably has the most realistic drinking system in any video game, as the effects of alcohol are actually delayed just like they are in real life. Matter of fact, while we're on the topic, drinking actually has real uses, as it can temporarily give Henry more strength and extra charisma points. But don't overindulge, as you will experience negative side effects like a hangover the next morning. Kingdom Come has 7 different combat skills, 11 other skills outside of combat, and 9 different stats that will all be leveled up just by playing the game. Some skills and stats like speech, agility, and warfare will naturally level up as you progress throughout the game, but you'll have to go out of your way to level up many of the other skills in the game. For example, as I stated previously, Henry starts the game being unable to read, and the only way you can unlock that skill is by finding someone who can teach you. The main story doesn't do this for you, but thankfully one of the early main missions will put you in a town who has a scribe who can give you reading lessons. This is an essential skill that you're going to have to learn in order to do other tasks like alchemy, but you can also read books that will help you level up other skills like books about horsemanship, maintenance, thievery, and more. KCD has fantastic writing and character choices throughout the game that aid in the role-playing opportunities, but for me the best role-playing aspects of this game is the immersion. Outside of Red Dead Redemption 2, Kingdom Come Deliverance arguably has the most fleshed out open world ever made. This game actually came out several months before RDR2 and features several of the same mechanics as that game. For instance, all characters in the game have their own routines. Early in the morning, you can see everyone wake up and start their day. By 8 in the morning, most of the shops are open, and later on in the day, you can catch up with many familiar faces in the local tavern. This doesn't just go for friendly NPCs either, as enemies in the game also have their own routines which you can take advantage of. For instance, if you have to scout in an enemy fortress, it's best to go at night where majority of them will be asleep and fewer guards will be on watch. Not only that, but many of the towns in the game are absolutely massive. While they aren't as big as real-life medieval cities, they put many of the villages and locations from Skyrim to shame. Sure, there are plenty of towns that only have a few houses, but eventually you will discover locations that take up a lot of space and feature buildings that are impressively huge. However, the most immersive aspect of this game in my opinion is the several tangible and tactile skills throughout the game. I've already mentioned the reading, which forces you to actually read the pages, but there are several other skills in the game that turn into mini-games. Aside from eating and drinking, which is done in a menu, nearly all aspects of this game have been gamified, from performing maintenance on your sword on the grind zone, to the alchemy system, which is a highlight for me personally. There are several different mechanics to manage with alchemy, but it's incredibly satisfying to read a recipe book and then begin to manually brew up your own potions. Realism is a highly controversial topic within the video game community, and I agree with most in the sense that realism isn't necessary for a game to be good or even immersive, but when realism is done right, it can most definitely help immerse players in a video game world. I think Kingdom Come Deliverance is the best and most extreme example of that, and for those who couldn't stomach the more unforgiving aspects of this game, I would highly recommend checking out the sequel. Warhorse has spent the past several years refining and polishing the mechanics that they set up in the first game, and since you continue the adventures of Henry, the game is much easier than the first since Henry became a competent character by the end of the first game. If you stayed until the end, thank you for watching. Let me know your own thoughts about both video game Realism and Kingdom Come Deliverance down in the comments. If you enjoyed, please consider subscribing for more videos like this. For my next video, I'll be forcing myself to fall in love with a game that I could never really get into, but it's still one that's beloved by millions of fans. I can't wait to see you guys then. Have a good one.